Okay, can everybody hear me all right? Wave if you can hear me from the back. You can. Lovely. I'm Kate, and I've been asked to talk about my experience of actually doing all this stuff. So like you, I was probably wandering around this place probably about 4 years ago, feeling, oh my goodness, it's terribly grand designs, and trying to think about putting into context of a little chalet bungalow. So I'm going to talk about my experience, warts and all, and please think about questions you'd like to ask, and I hope it's interesting. So the opportunity appeared in March 2021 with this little chalet bungalow in Pewsey. It'd been empty for a year, built in 1965, had old cavity wall insulation injected in 1970, no insulation in the roof, large single glazed crittle windows, an open fire still with the burnt logs and ashes in it, night storage heaters, an immersion heater in a tank, and the energy performance certificate was F. So not very good at all. Little thing to sort of take note of is this little dormer here up in the attic. So there's 2 bedrooms either end and a bathroom on the landing. And I did do some building work to extend that, as you'll see. So where did I start? Well, I started here, and in the middle of COVID, I did every online course I could possibly do to try and understand what I was trying to achieve. So I did the window course, the insulation course, the heating course, everything course. Lots of my family and friends have got solar PV and had got houses that had external insulation, and they'd talk to them. And then I came across a very interesting organisation called Catalyst, which was a combination of universities working with homes to try and understand what we're going to need to do to retrofit people's homes away from fossil fuels. And the conversation with these 2 engineers in my old house in Warwick really got me thinking about what was achievable. So when I moved down to Pewsey, I kind of had lots and lots of ideas and needed someone to help me put them into place. So I was very lucky. Friends put me in touch with their local builder, and they were absolutely brilliant, I have to say. I was very good at cups of tea, and I did about 0.01% of the actual building with them, but they were brilliant. I had a local architectural technician who drew up the drawings for planning on the extension of the dormer. Because this was an old house and basically nobody knew where anything was, I did have a ground survey, penetrating radar, to find where the drains, water pipes, electricity cables, boundaries, etc. And we did discover a massive high voltage cable running across the northern boundary of my property, which hadn't appeared on the deeds. So I'm glad I did that. I started ripping out a huge overgrown liandii hedge in August 21. And we actually then started the actual renovation of the building in October, and we finished in March 22. So the lesson I went away with was insulation, insulation, and insulation. And I decided to go for internal insulation because the rooms were lovely and big, and I could afford to take off a chunk off the internal walls. Because I went for insulation, I had learnt that I had to think very carefully about ventilation, and I went for mechanical ventilation and heat recovery, and this has proved to be probably the best investment I made. I thought it was a necessary evil when I did it, but it's just been extraordinary. The house is always fresh. I've got no mould, which is what I was suffering from up in Warwick, and I probably don't have to turn the heating on until beginning of November, halfway through November this last year, because it's recirculating the heat. I went for double glazed windows and composite external doors, and I'm glad I did, because I did think about triple glazing, but building materials went up by something like 30%, so my poor little piggy bank ended up completely slaughtered. I went for an air source heat pump, because we don't have any gas in Pewsey, so I really didn't have any option. And I thought about underfloor heating, but it meant ripping into the concrete base, and then all the problem of the height and the stairs. So I went for radiators instead. And then I put on top of that bamboo flooring with a a little insulating membrane underneath it between that and the concrete, and larch cladding on the outside gable ends. So just as a kind of sort of introduction, this is my house chopped like a cake, and I've got an outside brick wall. I've then got the old cavity with old fibre insulation in it, got the block work, and then I've got Celotex King Bag Mannock internal insulation, and then plasterboard on the walls. There's a little 5mm insulation between the concrete and the bamboo floor. And then I've got a cold attic, so my insulation runs right across the top of the floor of the attic with the plasterboard underneath it. I've got wood cladding on the front, then there's a waterproof membrane, and then there's the insulation, and then in the eaves I've stuffed glass wool fibre, trying to keep the bridging of the cold away. So that's the kind of structure, and I hope that's helpful. So this is what the insulation looks like. A lot of people always ask me what it looks like, and actually you can see it now because it's on display here. But it's basically this foam stuff. It's fossil fuel derived, which I felt uncomfortable about, but I just couldn't afford to go with natural fibres at that time. So this is it going on. So here is the frame of the extended dormer going in with the windows, and you can see the membrane across the windows there, which is the damp-proof membrane lying. And then we've got this is Mannock insulation going up on the inside, and then it's going on the inside of the rafters in the A-frame of the roof. And then these are the big ducts for the mechanical ventilation and heat recovery. And that's the space under the eaves where we put more of the insulation across the top of the walls to try and keep as much of the bridging happening from the external to the internal of the building. So mechanical ventilation and heat recovery. Basically I've got two vents on my west-facing gable, one for in, one for out, and then behind that, on the wall behind, is this big box, and that is the heat exchange and fan, and then the air comes in, gets warmed by the outgoing air going out, and that fresh warm air is then piped into the house, into the roofs. It goes down the side of the gable, that side, and then it comes across the top of the ceiling space between the first floor and the ground floor. And then you've got stale moist air going out to the bathrooms and fresh warm air coming in. And it was a lot of money to install it, but as I said, it's been probably one of the best things I did. I was surprised how good it was. So, whole air source heat pump for the whole house. I went for Daikin, again talking to family and friends and recommendations, and had awful problems getting hold of the unit. So even though I paid for a year in advance of it being installed, I had to sack one supplier because nothing ever turned up. The second supplier suddenly announced they hadn't got the right size pump for me and literally just left me hanging. So I went with this unit. It's slightly too big for the house, which is disappointing, but at least it works and it's warm. So big fan turned up. It's absolutely silent. It is absolutely incredible how quiet it is. And then it's my hot water tank and the actual mechanism for running the air source heat pump, and all the pipes going in and out, and it goes to radiators. So that was my air source heat pump.
Yep.
So what was my principle was to try and reuse and reduce and recycle everything I had. So we tried reusing the joists when we opened up the 45-degree slope on the roof to produce the extended dormer. And that wood, post-war wood, was so solid that the boys started having a tantrum about how difficult it was to cut. But we tried to reuse that as much as we could. I just reused all my internal doors. I didn't do anything different with those. And then I was just amazed at what you could get second-hand. So on Gumtree, I got myself a solid oak door kitchen for 750 quid. And again, friends gave me basins, the tiles I got given by friends, concrete slabs got given by friends, and lots of furniture given by friends. So I really focused on putting all my money into the fabric of the building, and then, reusing whatever I could internally. So before, that was my little house. You can see very overgrown. Somebody's obviously planted a Christmas tree in its time actually at the front door. And then this back dormer, and you can see the bits of the Leandii hedge I had to get rid of. And now what I've got is this double space hallway with a Velux leak giving even more light. I then went for a UVPC window that has a flush casement, so it looks like the old wooden windows frames, and everybody has said that does look very nice. And then the back, you can see this extended dormer going the full length of the house with my rolled steel joists going in there, and then cladding on the ends of the building. So I then saved up more money and I added solar panels and batteries the year before last, and here they are. So they're placed landscape. I've got 12 of them on my south-facing roof. I'm using my lovely old vine. I've actually got 13 bottles of Chateau No. 8 in the cupboard at the moment brewing, but I'm using that as a solar screen. It's actually quite hot. And here's my battery in the garage. So what I've done since I've been in there is really look at the difference in the cost of heating your home. So here, these first 4 spots are my little house in Warwick, which was a 2 up, 2 down, end of terrace, 1996 built house, about 100 square metres, had a gas combi boiler, and you can see that in the winter, on average, I was using somewhere between 35 and 45 kilowatt hours per day to heat that little house, including the hot water. This was my first winter at Pusey, so this is moving in March, and a bigger house, 200 square metres, so double the size. I put 4 night storage heaters on the lowest possible setting just to stop pipes freezing up, and the immersion heater, and I was absolutely frozen. It was long johns and a woolly hat for 6 months. It was very, very cold. Then we did the retrofit, and my air source heat pump was put in on Christmas Eve of 2022. And, you can see there that straight away, nice and warm house, only 15 kilowatt hours in sort of January, December. So really it is a third of the energy I was using before. So for me, this was confirmation that, I had done the right thing. So you can very clearly see now, as I've been measuring my energy consumption for the whole house, what's been happening. So here's summer, and here's winter starting to build up. This is when it goes below freezing, and the air source heat pump has to work much harder to extract whatever heat is out there in the cold air actually into the house. So all in all, I've reduced my energy consumption compared to a gas combi boiler by about 30 kilowatt hours per 24 hours for a normal, wet, cold, rainy winter's day. I then put the solar PV and batteries in, and now, again, when it was below freezing, you can see it has made a slight difference, and that's because it's nice and sunny and the solar panels work. However, they don't work very well when it's pouring with rain. So it's a little bit of a reduction there of about 5 kilowatt hours if it's sunny. But normally, in the cold, wet, rainy winter, my solar panels hardly deliver anything, so I'm using the grid. So now let's look not just at the heating, but the whole house. So this is all the electricity I'm drawing down from the grid to heat the home. So back to where we were before. So there's my 4 night storage heaters and Kate absolutely frozen stiff. Now we're doing the retrofit. The air source heat pump goes in. And you can now see that in the summer, I need about 10 kilowatt hours per 24 hours to run everything. So that's summer there. Solar PV and batteries go in, and I'm using nothing. And in fact here, when I had my old meter before the smart meter, the meter was going backwards, which was fantastic, felt so good. So when the meter is running backwards below 0, I'm actually feeding the grid. At this point here, I had the smart meter put in, and I now know that I'm saving with my solar and batteries for those 6 months when I'm pretty well self-sufficient. I'm saving about £1,000 per year. I've now got my export as well. So far I've generated about 1,400 kilowatts, which I'm sending back. So for somebody who's now, gone from an income to a pension, the most important thing for me is not the payback, it's the return on investment. And that works out a return on investment about 7%, which I couldn't get from an ISA or a bank or anywhere else. So I feel that is a really good investment for my lump sum in terms of putting that in. And that's the smart meter going now. So one of the things I've been doing since, I'm now apparently very expert at this, is I did train as a home energy advisor with the Centre for Sustainable Energy, and Wiltshire Council gave me a thermal lithium camera, and I've been going around people's homes helping them see what's possible. And this is me applying it to my own home. And here's the floor ban of my ground floor, and I did have here a sort of wooden rotten door, and then a tile porch, and then another wooden rotten door. And these 2 internal walls now butt onto the external walls here, and I've got a gap where I haven't got any internal insulation. So this is the bedroom here, looking at that wall. So you can see the curtains, and you can see the internal wall here, nice and warm. And then you can see very clearly the uninsulated wall between the bedroom and the porch. And you can see the cold bridging coming across the top here at 10 degrees, 11 degrees. The room actually feels very warm because the radiator's working and it's very gentle. But it just goes to show what happens if you don't insulate your walls. Okay, so everyone says, do you need to insulate your walls? Well, yes, and I got a real shock, doing it for me. I was just curious as to what difference insulation makes. So, what were the nuggets? What did I really learn from this? Go with local builders, linked with their trades. It was just fantastic. The whole project planning just happened without me having to worry about it. As I said, the mechanical ventilation and heat recovery was a really, really good investment. I got no mould, fresh air. I can dry my clothes without having to use a dryer. It's just extraordinary. The air source heat pump, now I've got it working, is fantastic. I've got a warm home, lots of hot water, very affordable. My electricity bills are less than 150 a month in the winter. I did manage to just get under the wire to get the renewable heat incentive grant for that, which was a huge help. I then started to know who the local firms were, and I went with a local firm who are now also servicing my air source heat pump, which is really helpful. And I'm very glad to say that my EPC rating went from F to C, and now, since I've had the solar panels put on, I'm a B. So I'm feeling quite pleased with myself. One of the things I will talk about is having gone for the internal insulation and left the old fibre in the narrow 70s cavity, my worry is the driving rain that we're getting now is actually making that damp. And I was concerned because I didn't put a membrane downstairs between the internal insulation and the wall. I was told that mechanical ventilation and heat recovery would deal with it. I'm glad to say that so far it has. I've got a little patch under the bath where I can actually see the external wall, sorry, the internal block wall, and I'm monitoring that very carefully to make sure I don't get any mould build up. And so far, so good. But it was a little concern of mine. So Niggles, where the air source heat pump suppliers, it is getting better. But one of the advantages of going with local firms is if they're investing in their workforce and training, they're actually getting properly trained. Whereas with the big national firms, what I found was, you know, they weren't investing in people's training and the turnover was so fast. Yeah, I struggled. So really go on recommendations. As I've said, I've got no vapour-proof membrane downstairs, and that does worry me. But I have got mechanical ventilation and told I didn't need it. As I pointed out with my lovely vine, I'm still learning to balance the mechanical ventilation and heat recovery with the air source heat pump in the winter and the solar gain through my lovely double glazed south-facing windows. There's quite a marked difference when I move from the front of the house to the back of the house, but I mean, it's comfortable. And then sorting out my electricity credits and debits with suppliers who haven't really twigged yet what happens to people's bills when they put solar panels in. What would I do differently? I would go for having a home retrofit survey and assessment. There are lots of organisations that do this now, and it gives you some idea of the cost and benefit. The question is, do you trust the modelling? So that was my reason why I actually measure my output now, so I can really see that an air source heat pump does only use a third of the energy. Go with one company if you can to fit all the green technology that you're using. I made that mistake. I should have gone for mechanical ventilation and the air source heat pump from one supplier. Use local companies based on their reputation. They're integrated with all the local firms, and they will also do the servicing. There is a big issue at the moment which we're really trying to build energy for, which is with new building regulations, because they're really not up to scratch, and getting people re-skilled. I learnt, you know, that the value of accreditation with those air source heat pump suppliers was actually meaningless, and I didn't know which one of the plethora of acronyms to go with. So my advice is when you are thinking about an air source heat pump, is check with the Heat Pump Federation, which is the professional sort of organisation for heat pump engineers and suppliers. So that is the end of what I've got to say. So I would love to hear your views,